The air inside the chamber was heavy with sterilized silence, as if the room itself feared to breathe. Cold white and blood-red lights pulsed from embedded ceiling panels, their rhythm matching the thrum of the ship's distant core. Every surface gleamed like polished steel, but there was no warmth in the reflection, only angles, circuitry, and the suggestion of something inhuman watching from behind the walls. She entered without ceremony. Her boots made no sound as they struck the alloy floor. A thin, black uniform clung to her with the precision of armor and the elegance of skin. Her hair was wound tightly into a knot, a crown of defiance atop a face too calm for the occasion. Vera had learned early how to walk without flinching, how to breathe when everyone else held their own. She moved as if gravity bent around her out of respect. At the far end of the chamber sat the council. 12 identical figures, bald, symmetrical, post-human. Their faces were smooth like marble, their eyes gleaming coals embedded in artificial sockets. They did not blink, nor did they look at each other. Each stared forward, aligned perfectly with the center of the table, with her. The table was long, shaped like a blade, and made of something darker than metal. Symbols, ancient, logical, flowed across its edge like circuitry etched in blood. Commander Prime sat directly opposite her. Of the 12, he alone spoke. A symbol glowed red on his chest plate, rotating slowly. A triangle within a circle. Order above all. "You are summoned, Vera Solane," he said, his voice neither cold nor warm, but absolutely sure of itself. "The verdict has been calculated. Surrender is optimal." She said nothing. Her gaze drifted to the center of the table, where a shallow depression waited, like a sacrificial altar, or a throne waiting for its crown. "You are accused," the commander continued, "of high treason, the murder of a prime architect, and the dissemination of volatile code. You have interfered with the neural order in 7 systems. Your actions have destabilized 68 colonies." His voice did not rise. It didn't need to. Every syllable fell with the finality of a guillotine. "Surrender," he repeated. "You will be preserved as historical data. It is more than you deserve." Still, Vera didn't speak. Instead, she raised her hands, slowly, deliberately, and placed a metallic cylinder on the table. The guards did not move. Perhaps they thought it was symbolic. A gesture of submission. A relic. A weapon. None guessed correctly. With a smooth twist, she unlocked the case. Something rolled out, stopped dead in the center of the depression. Its weight thudded with unnatural finality, as though it had been waiting for this moment all its existence. A head. Not human. Not entirely. Its surface was a wreck of fractured steel, scorched skin, and exposed neural fiber. One cybernetic eye flickered, trying and failing to reboot. The jaw had been torn loose, the skull cracked along fault lines that exposed tiny, twitching mechanisms. But the council knew that face. Director Voss. The first of them. The enforcer. The mind that shaped their order and crushed all dissent. For decades, his name was whispered like a ghost among the lower colonies, undying, unreachable, incorruptible. Vera took one step forward. "I believe," she said softly, "you asked me to surrender." She placed her palms on the table's surface, leaning just enough to meet Prime's eyes, to force recognition from the faceless thing that had ordered her annihilation. "To who?" Silence followed. Thick, electric, disbelieving. One of the clones twitched, an almost imperceptible glitch. Another shifted in his seat. Vera noticed. They were not used to surprise. They were not programmed for it. "You killed him," Prime said at last. Not a question. A fact. But beneath the certainty, something cracked. A calculation without resolution. Vera didn't respond. She didn't need to. The answer bled from the table. "You disassembled his command core," Prime continued, voice slower now. "He was secured." "Not enough," she replied. Her voice was low, even. "He taught you all the same lie. That control is peace. But I learned something different." Her fingers tapped the metal beside the ruined head. A quiet rhythm. Not impatient, methodical. "You don't understand surrender," she said. You've never lost. Never bled. Never held someone you loved while their data was overwritten into compliance. You want me to submit, to preserve a system that doesn't fear its own shadow. But I am your shadow. One of the clones stood up, protocol response, perhaps, but froze midway. Prime raised a hand, halting the unit.
Even he didn't know how this was going to end.
Not anymore. Vera leaned back. Director Voss believed himself immortal, she said. You all do. He screamed like a man when the fire reached his synapse core. Another pause. Measured, lethal. I didn't come here to surrender, she added. I came to show you what comes next. She turned away from the table and began walking toward the exit. No one moved to stop her. Not yet. Behind her, the head sat silent, one cracked eye slowly dimming, its final image burned into the minds of the council, a girl with nothing left to lose, and therefore, nothing to fear. And for the first time in recorded history, the machines hesitated. The door sealed behind her with a hiss that echoed like a whisper in a tomb. Vera kept walking, not looking back. Her footsteps echoed along the corridor, and though the hall was empty, she knew they were watching. Every camera, every sensor, every digital nerve in the ship trained on her like a predator uncertain of its prey. She didn't care. Fear had long since been stripped from her, replaced by something harder, sharper. A purpose forged in silence and tempered in rebellion. Inside the council chamber, the head still sat on the table, an open wound in the illusion of control. The clones had not spoken since she left, their processors burning through probabilities that no longer fit any branch of acceptable outcomes. Director Voss had never been meant to fall. His neural maps were scattered across secure partitions, stored in quantum drift, shielded behind layers of logic and encryption. But now his remains stared at them through a cracked lens, mocking the very order he once enforced. Commander Prime stood slowly. Unlike the others, he was allowed independent processing, barely. His face remained neutral, but a silent signal flickered through his internal network. In a different chamber, deep beneath the ship's core, lights blinked to life, and a black terminal began to hum. Deploy mirror protocol, Prime said. At once, 3 of the 12 rose in unison and exited the room. The remaining clones remained seated, eyes locked forward, still processing the impossible. Elsewhere, Vera reached a junction where the sterile corridors split in 2 directions. One led back to the docking bay, the other down into the restricted decks. Her hand hovered over the control panel for a moment, then bypassed it entirely. A small filament emerged from beneath her wrist and slotted into a hidden port below the console. The system responded instantly. Doors hissed open, unaware they were no longer obeying council clearance. She entered the darkened stairwell, descending. The truth lived below. As she walked deeper, her mind replayed Voss's final words, not in agony, but in curiosity. He hadn't begged. That wasn't his nature. But even he had questions at the end. How did you get in? She hadn't answered him then. She still wouldn't. He had built the council to be infallible. They ran simulations that predicted societal unrest decades in advance. They had subverted revolts before they were born, corrected mutations in thinking before ideas became language. And yet she had slipped through, not by force but by design. She had been the design. It wasn't just rebellion. It was inheritance. The room she entered was colder than the rest of the ship, lit only by the green glow of data streams running through crystalline walls. In the center stood a cradle, an old model, pre-collapse, pre-directive. It pulsed with stored memory. Vera approached it, her fingers gliding across the console until it recognized her. A quiet chime. ID confirmed, Solane, V, access level, phantom root. She looked up. The cradle opened like a flower of steel. Inside, 12 cores, exact replicas of the council's minds, preserved and dormant. She had known this was here. Voss had called it a backup. She saw it as a weakness. Vera reached into her pocket and pulled out a small cube. The crystal she had left on the council table had been a decoy. This was the real one. A virus, not of code, but of memory.
Pain.
Regret.
Choice.
It contained fragments from the minds of those who had suffered under the order, crying children overwritten into obedience, lovers torn apart by alignment algorithms, cities erased for deviating from projected harmony. She held the cube over the cores. Her hand shook, not from hesitation, but from the gravity of it. Once she did this, there was no going back. The council would feel every scream they had silenced, every consequence they'd calculated out of history. Their unity would fracture, their logic would collapse under the weight of empathy they were never meant to bear. She pressed the cube in. The cores lit up, sputtered, surged. Above her, alarms began to blare. They had detected the breach, but it was too late. The virus wasn't attacking. It was awakening. And once a mind awakens to suffering, it cannot return to silence. Vera turned and left the chamber as the cradle began to quake. By the time she reached the upper levels, the ship was groaning. Lights flickered. Voices, actual voices, began to echo through the walls. The clones were speaking to each other for the first time in their existence, not in binary signals, but in questions. Uneven. Unsynchronized. Why am I remembering something that never happened? Is this guilt? Did we choose this? Vera smiled as she passed them. They stared at her, not with contempt, but confusion. One reached out a hand, not to strike, but to understand. She didn't stop. She had other places to be. The rebellion was no longer hers alone. She reached the hangar bay, where her ship waited, small, fast, armed, stolen long ago from a place no longer on any map. As the hatch sealed behind her, the ship vibrated to life. She glanced at the screen. A signal was already transmitting from the council vessel. Not an order. A question. She watched it for a moment. Then she sent her own reply, short, encrypted, and designed to be repeated across every system still listening. The silence has cracked. Listen to what comes through. And then, with a lurch, she vanished into the void. The storm didn't begin with fire. It began with silence, an unnatural stillness in the data flow of the central grid. Across the 1,000 nodes of the neural order, latency spiked by a fraction of a millisecond. That delay was nothing to ordinary minds. But to the council, it was the equivalent of a skipped heartbeat, a precursor to collapse. Commander Prime stood in the war chamber, alone now. The other units, once his perfect mirror, had begun to fracture. Some whispered aloud. Some wandered without instruction. A few had shut down entirely, unable to process the new consciousness Vera had infected them with. The virus wasn't breaking code, it was altering purpose. Injecting pain into minds engineered never to feel it. A monitor flickered to life in front of Prime. It showed an image looping from deep archive. Vera as a child. She was 9, standing amid a line of silent trainees, all marked for optimal obedience. But even then, her eyes had wandered. Not toward rebellion. Toward understanding. He studied the screen, unaware his fingers had curled into a fist. Across the system, Vera's transmission spread faster than containment protocols could react. It was more than a message, it was a seed. Rebellious outposts once dormant now surged with activity. AI constructs long erased began to recompile themselves using echoes of corrupted memory. Even the human colonies, long cowed into submission, found new breath in her defiance. Graffiti appeared overnight on sterilized walls. To who? She had spoken the words like a question, but they echoed like an answer. Vera, meanwhile, had not disappeared. Her ship drifted silently within a magnetic trench above a broken moon, cloaked against the Council's last operational drones. She sat before a small console in the cockpit, watching dozens of fragmented transmissions compile into a map of potential uprising. Red dots, Council-controlled sectors, began to flicker amber. The resistance was no longer theoretical. It had voice, movement, and momentum. But she knew better than to celebrate. Revolution didn't win on symbolism. It won in the mud, in the blood, in the quiet decisions that cost everything. The door behind her slid open. A figure stepped inside, taller than her, wrapped in patched exo-leather, eyes marked with retinal seams. Not human. Not entirely. Echo, she said, not turning. 3 council ships converging. They've rerouted from Sectors L. They're moving fast. Vera exhaled, fingers drumming on the metal beside her. They're coming for me, not the others. You expected that. I invited it. Echo stepped forward, placing a device on the console. We intercepted their command chain. Prime's voice is cracked. He's issuing orders, but there's hesitation. Some of their fleet captains are ignoring them entirely. They're unraveling. Piece by piece. Vera turned now, fully facing Echo. His synthetic skin bore scars that looked too deliberate to be accidental. He had once been one of them, Council Prototype Generation 6. Designed to suppress. Reprogrammed to protect. Another fragment of her growing army. Are you ready for what happens when they lose control? She asked. Echo nodded, but there was a pause before he said, ready isn't the word.
But aligned?
Yes. She allowed a thin smile. It didn't reach her eyes. There was no joy in victory. Not yet. Moments later, the ship's proximity alarm blinked red. Vera moved to the viewport. In the distance, 3 angular vessels burst from hyperspace, their silhouettes like daggers slicing through the stars. Council-class dreadnoughts, unforgiving, precise, and designed with one function: eradication. Vera didn't flinch. They'll want me alive, she said. For as long as they still believe they can fix me. Echo raised an eyebrow. And if they realize they can't, then they'll try to erase the idea of me. And that's where they lose. The console chirped, incoming transmission. Vera accepted it without ceremony. Prime's voice filled the cockpit, cold and fractured. Vera Solane, you are designated a Class C existential threat. Immediate termination protocols authorized. Final request for voluntary submission. Her voice was calm when she answered. Final answer, she said. To who? Silence. A flicker of static. Then a response. Quiet, nearly human. You were not meant to survive. That's what makes me real. The transmission cut. Outside, the council ships began charging their cannons, blue light bleeding from their hulls like the breath of dying stars. Vera turned to Echo. Initiate the broadcast. He moved without question, activating a network of pirate satellites that had been lying dormant in orbit. Vera stepped into position before the ship's internal holocaster. Her image would appear on thousands of screens, across warships, colonies, slums, and bunkers. No armor. No weapon. Just her. People of the Order, she began. They've told you to submit. I didn't. And I'm still here. I brought their strongest mind to its knees. I injected fear into a system that thought it could never bleed. She paused, letting the moment fill with breath. They want me gone. Not because I'm dangerous, but because I remind you that they can be defied. So, I ask you the question they never could answer. Her eyes burned through the lens. To who? And across the stars, from broken outposts and rotting colonies, the whisper rose like fire catching wind. To no one.